Hello, this is week 1 of the beginner sewing course. So to begin, we have our materials. We've got hand sewing needles, thread, our wax, our scissors. We've got 3 different pieces of muslin, any kind of cotton will do fine, that we'll use for our samples, and then a button with holes, one with 4, one with 2, a button with a shank, another button with a shank, and then a hook and an eye, and also a snap. So to get started, we're going to thread our needle. So we're going to take our needle here, and we are going to just slide right through, and I always like to double up. So I'm going to do double as long as I'm going to go, and I don't like to keep the thread too long. There's a saying, long thread, lazy girl, and so we want to keep it not too much longer than our arm, because that's really all the further we can comfortably pull it tight when we're sewing. Okay, so we're threaded. Now we're going to do something called loving the thread. Depending on the type of thread, your thread may be very wound tight from coming off the spool. So we just want to feel the thread, pull it out, relax it from being wound around that spool. Okay, and now we're ready to wax. We use the beeswax to make the thread strong. It's easy to get, doesn't matter what kind you use, and we're just going to kind of hold it with our thumb and drag it through just once or twice like that. And then we'll iron it to melt and harden that thread. There we go. Okay, perfect. So now we have some nice strong thread and we are ready to hand sew. Now, to tie the knot, what I like to do is take the thread in my forefinger and my thumb, roll it a bit, loop it around that finger like that, and then use my thumb to roll it off and pull it tight. That's my favorite way to quickly and easily tie knot, and then I just like to trim that little tail, get rid of that. Okay, now we are ready. So we're going to create our first sewing sample with our first square of muslin. I folded one side up to give us a double layer to sew on the buttons, or to do the first running stitches, and then I double folded this one over for our first catch stitch. So that's our first muslin square or cotton square. We're going to begin with a regular running stitch. So literally just a big wide basting stitch, up, down, nothing special, just like that, and pull it all the way through. And our knot that we tied is going to catch right there. We're going to use this stitch in place of pinning sometimes, because it's so easy to do, fast and easy to remove, and for basting when we need to gather and really just hold layers of fabric together. But ultimately, this is the type of stitch that we will usually remove later. We're putting it in as a temporary stitch for some reason. And that is it. That is our running stitch. And when we get to the end, I just like to knot that off with a regular knot, because again, we're probably going to cut it off later, so I don't want to do too big a knot to get in our way later. Okay, we're going to tie our knot off again, forefinger and thumb, roll, wrap, and slide. There we go. Trim those little tails. Next, we're going to do a tack. When we're tacking maybe the end of a zipper, if you had to cut off a zipper before its natural ending and you needed to tack the end of the zipper, or you needed to tack down a flap of fabric from the inside, maybe a lining. Tacks are used for all kinds of things to hold in place a couple of layers. So we're going to come up from the back and just maybe a few, maybe a quarter of an inch usually is probably the width. I would say a typical tack would be a quarter or an eighth of an inch. And we're just gonna, oh, we're a little bit tangled there, of course, as always. The wax also will typically help with less tangling. That's another reason to do it. And then we're gonna come up in the same spot to keep that tack nice and clean. Make sure that we don't get any threads on the back that are uneven, and then go back down through the same spot before. And depending on how secure it needs to be, I would say it only needs to be 2, tops 3 times. And again, we just want to try to stitch directly on top of where we put the stitches before, so that it looks nice and clean. And then we're going to go to the back and pick up a little bit of fabric and thread right at our exit point, but try not to go through to the front. And we're going to pull that through, and then we're going to take our thread before our loop is gone and just put that through like that and pull tight. That's a nice easy knot. I'll show that to you once more. We're going to put the thread through, catching a few of the threads and maybe a little few threads of the fabric, and put our needle through that knot and pull nice and tight. Perfect. Then on a garment, we're going to want to just hide the thread tail by sticking the needle through the fabric of probably the lining in this case on a garment, but not coming through to the other side, you see? And so then we're hiding that little thread tail, just the end of it, instead of clipping right next to our knot. It's just easier to, it's cleaner and a little more secure, leaving ourselves that little knot. And then we're just gonna trim that right there, and there we go, nice and clean. All right, let's tie that knot again. You're gonna get really good at tying these knots. 4th finger, thumb, and slide it on off. Okay. Next, still on that first piece of cotton or muslin, we're gonna do our we're gonna do our whip stitch. A whip stitch is nice and easy. It can be used for a huge range of closing different garments, closing linings. It's a super useful, super easy stitch that I really like. I'm gonna start on the edge of what is a mock hem here. And I'm not gonna catch our, let's say this is the outer layer of our garment down here. I'm not gonna catch that first because I want to hide that knot underneath what is our turn up of our hem here. Then, you see that there, so that's not connected there. Then, this stitch is a little bit harder to make invisible. We're gonna just try to pick up a few threads with our needle of the garment fabric, and then we're gonna catch the fold of our hem. And you'll see, after a few stitches, just a few threads, and we're trying to keep these stitches nice and uniform so that they look clean and pretty, and we don't want to pull it too tight. We only want to pull it tight enough so that it looks secure, but not too tight that it scrunches up. And if you're in a hurry, or you're going to just use this stitch to keep your fabric in place temporarily, you can make these stitches quite a bit wider. They don't have to be this close, but that's what they're gonna look like. Just catching a few stitches, uniform space between them, and then catching the fold of that hem there. And that's it. Nice and simple, nice and clean. And this can serve as a blind hem if you really take your time and only catch a couple of the stitches on the fabric itself. And I have used that as a blind hem before. So That's what it looks like on the inside, and that is typically what it looks like on the outside. So you're going to have those little tiny stitches coming through on the outside. So it's not the perfect blind hem, but it's definitely useful for a lot of different types of closing linings and closing garments. Okay, now to finish this off, we are going to catch the edge of our fold, pull the fabric or the thread through, and then catch the inside of that loop again, just like the last time. And I always like to do 2 knots. That always makes me feel the most secure. Right through that loop. Oh, and then see, I did catch a little bit of extra thread there. See that loop? I like to try to pull it cleanly through. So I like to do that part slowly so that I don't get that. But because I did tie the knot, I know that I can clip that extra thread, that extra fabric loop that I don't want there, because I want it to look nice and clean. I'm still going to hide my thread tails on the inside of that little fold there, just like we did the last time. And then I'm going to clip right there. And I'm going to just clip this little guy off because we knotted it. It's on the inside. That's okay. That will work. Okay. Now we're going to move to our second piece of muslin, and we're going to do our catch stitch. Now our catch stitch is one that I use the most frequently for, let's say, a suit lining. If I'm releasing the lining along the bottom, the jacket self fabric will be folded up like this, and then the lining will come a little bit over that edge and meet that. So what I want to do to reattach the lining is, imagine this is the folded, imagine this edge is the folded over lining. I want to get in here and reattach this lining to the suit jacket, but I don't want you to be able to see it on this side, and I want it to still be able to move around a little bit. I'll show you what I mean. I'm going to start on the inside of this folded over lining and secure my knot there. See how we cannot see it on this side of the lining? That's very critical. We don't want it to show through. So we're going to lift up this fold like this, and we're going to literally catch a thread on that side, the garment side, the fabric side, and catch a few threads on the lining side, but only one edge of the lining. So feel that you're not going through both layers of the folded lining, only the under layer. And I'll show you what that looks like in just a second. I like to pick up a few on each side with my needle, you see there? And then when I pull it through, it'll be even easier to see. Pull it through just like that. And that's what it looks like underneath. Catch, 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 kind of back and forth there. And then look here, when that lining comes down, it's not caught here at all. It is totally free of that second layer of lining, and that's what we want. That looks really good. Now, in this sample, you can see it on the other side of the fabric, but you won't be able to in a regular case because this fabric will have also been folded twice. So the lining will come and fold down under itself, and the hem will come up and fold under itself. Kind of more like this, where there's a fold there and a fold for the lining there. Both layers will be 2 instead of 1, so you won't be able to see that. So let's go a little bit further. Catch a little bit up there, catch a little bit down there, catch a little bit up there, catch a little bit up there. And I like to do a couple of catches on the needle at once because I think it is quicker and efficient. So if you can do that, I suggest you do. And there again, that's what it looks like. So let's do a few more, just like that. Keeping it even, keeping the stitches uniform, and not catching the other side of the lining. Just going back and forth. And when you use a matching thread to the matching fabric, it'll blend right in, so it won't look so harsh like the red on the cotton does right now. But I want to do that so that it's easier to see. But then you have a little bit more flexibility just in case you do catch the other side, for instance. Okay, that looks good. Okay, so now we're going to knot off just like we normally do. We're going to catch a little bit of that lining. Perfect. And then a few threads of that fabric and go right through our loop just like we usually do. And we want to stick the needle right through that knot we just made and do the same thing again. There we go. Oh, I left a little bit of thread again, but that's all right because it's hidden. And then we'll slide our little tail through the lining like usual to hide those thread tails and snip that right off. Okay.